Again, I am Wade Miller with Heritage Action, which is the political action arm of the Heritage Foundation. I'm not a candidate for office. It's a lot easier to sit on my couch and point at other people and tell them what they're doing wrong. But for everyone who is running for office or who is in office, thank you. You may not always get it right, but you're out there trying and doing, and I like to see that. Tonight's format is going to be, we're going to start off with some 15-minute opening remarks. Tara's going to lead us off there. But before we get to that, I want to stop real quick and say that on December 4th, the Heritage Foundation is going to be in Dallas. We're going to be doing a free screening of the documentary Veteran Nation. Stephen Bucci, who is the director of, I can't remember the name, it's really long, one of my bosses, I said this, but basically the foreign policy shop at the Heritage Foundation. And he is a 30-year veteran. He's been in the Pentagon, so he's got a lot of knowledge on veteran issues, as well as the military, defense, foreign policy, etc. I myself am a Marine veteran. I did 3 combat tours in Iraq, so I'll have a few comments there. The focus of the event will be basically on veteran issues, what the problems they're facing when they get home, what we can do to help them, and I think it's a good event heading into the holiday season. It's kind of, we got a lot going on locally, we got a lot going on domestically at the federal level, state level. But we also have a lot of men and women serving in uniform right now that are sleeping in the dirt, they're eating, plastic bags of food day in and day out, and kind of like to shift focus during the holidays back to them a little bit. I've got a card over there, my name on it, my contact information. If you want more information, grab my card on your way out, send me an email, I'll send you a link to the Eventbrite page. It's free, you can show up if you want professionals up by yourself. But the screen's free and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. December 4th at 7 p.m. at the Landmark Magnolia. You will have to register. Anyways, enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and now turn it over to Tara. She's going to have 15 minutes to present her argument. Then I'll go hand it over to Michael Connolly, and he'll have 15 minutes to present his argument. I'm going to ask a couple of questions as anything I see developing in their comments, maybe some loopholes, some problems. My job here is not to side with either one of them. My job is ask tough questions of both of them, and then they'll have 1 to 2 minutes to respond to my questions. I'm going to have 2 or 3 questions, probably max, at which point we'll turn it over to the audience for questions. Okay, Sarah? Whatever you're comfortable.
Hi, glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. So I wrote a book about the Electoral College, and I have to tell you guys, I'm way more used to talking about the Electoral College. Could probably do it in my sleep, to tell you the truth. So this is a new conversation. I'm happy to be here to do it. But I bring up the Electoral College book in part because it's actually part of the reason why it has taken me a while to come around to this position, where I feel that we should have a constitutional or a convention for proposing amendments. I am a little bit afraid that such a convention would end up using an amendment to the Electoral College, which is what I spend all my time fighting to preserve and protect. So I say that I want you guys to understand this is not what position that I am taking. It's something I've thought about and I've spent time, and I think I'm kind of doing something on the line that I work for. I've also been a little bit afraid of the runaway convention, which I'm sure a lot of you are also afraid of. But I've spent some time lately looking into the history of conventions in our country and the history of our constitutional convention, and I think that a lot of those things are unfounded, and history extended is actually kind of reassuring in this regard. So I'm going to start first just by reading the Constitution, and then we'll go into the history of that provision. I'm going to third discuss some possible controls that I think we could put on a convention for proposing amendments. And then finally, at the very end, I'm going to tell you why, even if none of that offends you, you still need to support this idea anyway. So let me just read the Constitution, okay? The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments,
Full house?
whether they're going to ratify or not. The other side of this, we have never used, and that is where the states petition the Congress for a convention for approving amendments. It has never been used in our history. If 2/3 of the states submit a request, Congress has to do it. They have no discretion in the matter. So let's look at the context in which the founders created this provision. They lived at a time where conventions were really common. You guys probably don't know, I don't know, there were 32 conventions that were held in and around the time of the Constitutional Convention. For anything from how to deal with the Indians to the First Continental Congress was in some ways a convention. It was the most broad convention, had the broadest authority of all of them. But they had conventions all the time. The term convention had a very specific meaning. It was basically a task force that was gathered for a particular purpose, to complete a particular task that had been assigned to them. These conventions were federal. Now, when I say federal, I mean it the way the founders meant it, not the way it's used today. Meaning, it was a state-based process. The states were in control. The states set the rules. The states appointed delegates. It was entirely about the states. There's another word that's used in the context of this convention we're proposing amendments sometimes, which is misunderstood, and that is the word general. And you'll hear somebody talk about a general convention, and then that's when people get afraid. They start talking about a runaway convention. They're going to quickly undo the Constitution. When the founders used the word general, they just meant everyone's invited. All the states get to come, as opposed to they would have said a partial convention, which might be only the New England states are invited to this convention as the New England matter. Let's see. Okay, and so another part of this history that leads to my second point is that the states had even then controls and limitations on their delegates. And I think if we were to do something like this today, then it would be very important for us to do the same thing, use the same types of controls that the founders used. First, as I said, the states are completely in charge of their own delegates. They decide how to vote them. They decide what they're going to do. They can revoke the delegates' credentials. If they exceed their authority, they can recall them. Now imagine they did this in 1787 without Facebook and Twitter and MSNBC or Fox News or CNN to help them, tell them that the delegates were exceeding their authority. You guys know in about 10 seconds, we would all know the Texas delegates had exceeded their authority. And we would recall them instantly if we wanted to, because Texas is in charge of that. Some people will say that the Constitutional Convention was an exception to this, but it was not. I have a quote here I want to read you, and there were other instances like this, but George Reed of Delaware, early on, asked that a certain line of discussion be delayed. And his reason was, basically, I don't have the authority to speak to this at all. He reminded the convention that the deputies of Delaware were restrained by their commission, basically how they got appointed, from assenting to any change to the rule of suffrage. And in case such a change should be fixed on, it might become their duty to retire from the convention. They took it very seriously. Now you hear people talk about how the Constitutional Convention itself was a runaway convention. It's not really as true as you think it is. They did exceed the authority that had been granted to them by Congress. But as I told you, these conventions were never a feature of the national government. They were the features of the state. And the delegates did not exceed the authority that the states had given them. The states had given them much broader authority than the Continental Congress had. Which is why, by the way, Delaware was referring to, George Reed of Delaware was referring to what his state would have told him. He didn't go talk about what the Continental Congress was going to do.
Who's that?
This is a leather phone.
Must be his phone. That's a horrible phone, man.
Oh, okay. There is a weird version of my ear.
Yeah.
My daughter told me it's supposed to snow this weekend. She was pretty surprised. I told her I didn't know that. Another control, okay, so I told you about how the delegates can be appointed. Another control is the states can limit the scope of the convention, can limit the topics. Any proposals outside of the scope are not considered legally binding. Congress does not have to send them to the states for ratification. Obviously, if we send, as Texas, send delegates to a convention and they do a whole bunch of crazy stuff, we don't have to ratify it even if Congress sends it our way. So there's a lot of control in that also. We need to always remember also that kind of convention gotten used to saying constitutional division. That's not what the Constitution authorizes at all. But the last control that I'll tell you guys about that I think is important is human nature. It is in the self-interest of the delegates to do what they've been asked to do. Are they going to ruin their reputation? Are they going to be vilified across the country because they decided to go out and do what they wanted to do instead of what the state asked them to do? And remember, by the way, you need not just one person to be so reckless with his reputation. You need a whole convention full of people that decide in the face of Twitter and Facebook, and everybody's going to instantly tell on them that they're going to go do this. A great analogy is one that I talk about in the context of the Electoral College, which is the faithless elector problem. Right? People talk about whether you're going to have an elector that is supposed to vote for one presidential candidate, but instead they vote for somebody else. It basically happens. The 2000 election is a great example of that. You guys know how much pressure it was for the George Bush electors to flip their votes. Not a single George Bush elector. And some of them are Democrats. Not a single one of them flipped their vote. Not one. I think the mission would be a similar kind of phenomenon. It's a theoretical problem. I think in real life it would be unlikely to happen, especially because delegates are involved the instant they transgress their boundaries. Okay, so let's say for a minute history is not convinced you. You think that that's probably no. All of that is ridiculous, Tara. I'm still not convinced. Well, I have two thoughts for you after that. One is, I would argue that we are getting to kind of a desperate state of affairs. Okay? And part of elected officials in Washington cannot be trusted. Even the good ones. Even ones that I have loved, even ones that I have supported, they go astray. Okay? Also, we never really undo the abuses. Okay, Ronald Reagan, who I adore, he didn't even undo it all. He kind of slowed it down for a while. You know, maybe we would just back up one or two steps, but we never really undid it. We never really did. And now we're waiting for it to move forward during his term. This trajectory towards more and more control by the federal government over our lives has to come to an end. Republican presidents have been Democratic ones. Portions of our Constitution have been rewritten. The Commerce Clause does not restrain our federal government. They don't care. They don't stay within the limits that have been imposed on it. They have their finger in every single pie. Can you guys name one thing you do on a daily basis that is not influenced by some regulation that the federal government has imposed upon you? You can't go get a stupid light bulb from the federal government telling you what it can and cannot do. Our national debt obviously is out of control. Even if Obamacare is repealed, which I hope to God it is, but even if it is, the government's still too expensive. It's still not going to reverse much of what has been done for our country. The founders did not anticipate this. They would not endorse a federal government that is so out of control. They would have expected the states to use their Article 5 prerogative to propose amendments and rein in the national government. They saw it as a fail-safe, a protection, something that would allow the states to reassert their power against a national government that was out of control. I'm going to read you guys a couple of quotes and then I'm done. In Federalist Papers number 85, Alexander Hamilton made an argument. One you guys know is ellipses in the middle. I don't know how to just read it. It has been urged that the persons delegated to the administration of the national government will always be disinclined to yield up any portion of the authority with which they are possessed. That the national rulers, whenever United States concur, will have no option upon the subject but to call for the amendment or the convention, nor however difficult it may be supposed to unite 2/3 or 3/4 of the state legislatures in amendments which may affect local interests, there could be no room to apprehend any such difficulty in a union on points which are merely relative to the general liberty or security of the people. In other words, who can doubt that they would do that if our safety and our liberty is at stake? We may safely rely on the disposition of the state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. He is talking about the convention in particular in that sense. Another Federalist wrote in the Pennsylvania Gazette, the states can always procure a general convention for the purpose of amending the Constitution, and that these amendments can be introduced into the Constitution, quote, although the President, Senate, and Federal House of Representatives should unanimously oppose each and all of them, down and using it. At the end of the day, the responsibility falls upon us, citizens of this great republic that have been entrusted to us, to make our voices heard, yes, through voting, but also through this tool that we have never taken the time to use. And it was given to us precisely so that we could bring in a federal government out of control, and it is time for us to use it.
I'll start off by saying I feel we were terrible for one point. That is that the language in the Constitution indicates that Congress shall call a convention an application to serve the state. Now, when we talk about the Constitution, that's what this is all about. It's a little book that I wrote called Our Constitution. And I took every article, every amendment, every section of the Constitution, I put it in there as they were originally written, and then I put my comments about what they really meant. I've been practicing constitutional law for 35 years. And I thought I knew the Constitution, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I read the Constitution repeatedly. But I was always picking out what was going to help me win this particular case. You know, what the Fourth Amendment, what part of the Fourth Amendment, etc. When I sat down to write this thing, and I read the whole Constitution, and I wrote my comments on each part of it, and suddenly it dawned on me how important this document was, and is, and how the founding fathers put a lot of thought into this thing. And if you read the body of the Constitution, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, now some of the amendments after that are kind of questionable, such as the 16th, and I'm going to get started on that. But if you read the Bill of Rights and the body of the Constitution, there's nothing that needs to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with the Constitution. What's wrong out there is the idiots that we have up in Washington that are ignoring the Constitution. That's what we need to go after. I'm Army officer, both Army officers. I've got a serving on combat tour number 7 in Afghanistan. 95 months of combat since 9/11. I've got another son who's a Black Hawk pilot. We all took the same oath of office. The protection of the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Obama took that oath. Eric Holder took that oath. Members of Congress, all federal bureaucrats, all members of the state legislature take that same oath. The difference is, I believe it. I advise by it. Most people don't even realize that, and I've written about in my blog about this, there are 2 federal statutes, criminal statutes, that say if you violate that oath, if you do anything to denigrate the Constitution or try to destroy it, you can go to jail for a year and be fined up to $10,000. What's Obama doing walking around free?
Yeah, really.
I'll give you a break. So when you start talking about a convention of the states, yes, the language in the Constitution says the Congress shall call a convention on the application of two-thirds of the states. What happens if they don't? You've got Harry Reid in the Senate. He won't even allow to come up to a vote. Most of you have heard by now, I'm sure, about the nuclear option being exercised today. 200 years of tradition of the United States Senate thrown out the window by Harry Reid. You think he's going to let it come to a vote? Well, that's a rhetorical question, but I think ultimately he will. But he will if they know that they can control the convention of the states. And therein lies a big problem. You read Article 5, but it doesn't set out any limitations. It's a great idea to think that, well, the states can all appoint their own delegates. But how many delegates? And how are they going to set up the voting? Hopefully it would be like the original convention. Each state would have one vote. But who's going to choose the delegates? The governor of the state? Well, that would be nice if you've got 30 Republican governors. I would trust all of them. And Steve Christie and Chris Christie in New Jersey will tell you by the point. These people are supposed to be told to the delegates. But suppose the governor's party will authority to do it. Suppose the legislature is allowed to do it. Republicans only control 26 of the state legislature. We don't know how this is going to be set up. We have no idea what the rules are going to be. Who's going to be the presiding officer? A lot of people dictate that's the president of the Senate. Which is who? Joe Biden. Can you imagine Joe Biden sitting up there in front of a constitutional convention with gavel in his hand? I mean, that's terrifying. So we don't know. And there's too much out there we don't know about. I do not see anything in the Constitution that would limit Congress from calling a convention, and it doesn't matter. All the states ask for it, all of them ask for a convention limited to deciding on a balanced budget. I can't see anything to stop Congress from saying, no, we're going to add in the Second Amendment. We're going to throw in some other issues that we want to deal with. We want to throw in abortion, we want to throw in immigration, we're going to do all this stuff, and we're going to take it all up. Suppose the delegates for each state are elected. Not by the legislature, not appointed by the governor, but elected by the population. We know that's called an election. And by the way, I know about constitutional convention. When I got out of the Army in 73, and I graduated from law school already, Louisiana, the state of Louisiana was holding the Constitutional Convention, number 10. We had 10 constitutions up to that point, or 9 at that point. I ran as a delegate, and I was supposed to be popularly elected, though nobody knew who I was. And I didn't get elected, but I did get appointed to a committee to help write some of the provisions that were going to be considered. Now, they were considering the whole Constitution, a brand new Constitution, everything. It was very well organized, it was seemingly under control, and it turned into absolute chaos. Because they hadn't made the rules stringent enough so that people knew what could be voted on, what couldn't be voted on. There was a lot of lobbying going on, which of course would go on with the Convention of the States. So it was chaos. They finally came up with a good Constitution. But conservatives controlled the state of Louisiana at that point. Not Republicans, but conservatives. When the Republican Party was meant to vote for our state convention. Of course, it was worse when I was in Mississippi, or in Barry Goldberg campaign. I was 60 years old. I was appointed Central Mississippi Chairman for the Barry Goldberg campaign. That sounds great. Well, there were only 3 Republicans in the whole state of Mississippi. Only 2 of them were old enough to vote. So they just sort of divided the state up amongst us, and that's what I did. But the convention ultimately succeeded in what it was doing. But we didn't have the partisanship there that we've got now. We didn't have a situation where you've got the President of the United States, the Attorney General, courts, and by the way, the purpose of that nuclear option is so that Obama can pass the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is where all the regular authority stuff is considered. The United States Justice Foundation, we've got 2 cases that are involved in front of that court right now. So that's the court back to speak. So you're going to have the courts, are probably not going to do much for us. We've got court judges out there that don't care. They're not going to get involved. This convention started running away and doing things it's not supposed to do. So we're in a real dangerous situation. And here's something else that concerns me. And this is something that I don't know if I could, if they call a convention, if I can get this included in the convention, because, I'm a constitutional lawyer, consider myself somewhat of a scholar, but I don't know how many people agree with me. I say this is kind of lawyers and judges sometimes, and they look at it, I think you got a kid. Then someone think about it and say, well, maybe he's not. The process to amend the Constitution, in my view, that is laid out in Article 5 applies only to the body of the Constitution and amendments other than the first 10. The Bill of Rights is untouchable, as far as I'm concerned. It cannot be amended. And I'll tell you why, because in this little booklet of mine, I've got something that most people have never even heard of. And that's the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Everybody knows it's the preamble of the Constitution. You had learned as a kid, recited at school. It's the preamble of the Bill of Rights. I'll read the first section of it. The conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure that their issue presents as its institution. In other words, when you read the preamble, they're saying these rights were not granted to the American people by the government. We read they were granted by the government, we read the government can take away from us. These rights are alien. They're human rights. They belong to us. You cannot touch them. Yet we continue to see them try to do it. We continue to see things going on in Washington that are going on. The attacks on the Second Amendment, the attempts to disarm our veterans by the federal government, the attacks on freedom of religion. All of this is going on. It's not going to be fixed by a convention of the states. I would love to say it will be, but I think if we have to fix it ourselves and the states stepping forward and say, we're not going to do this, we don't care what the federal government says. And the sheriff stepping forward and saying, you don't come into our county and try to take away guns. The American people standing up and kicking out of office all the people that are in Washington right now. We took that oath of office and violated it. And that, as far as I'm concerned, everybody that voted for Obamacare violated that oath of office. Yep. Because it is clearly in the Constitution. I said so in 2009 when I wrote the first bill, and I say so now. So my view is that the Constitution needs to be enforced. We need to enforce it by electing people who believe in it and will abide by its term and abide by their oath of office. Anything else? And I'm not against amendments. We can try to pass amendments through the other process. But the fear I have of the Constitutional Convention is we have a bunch of people in Washington who do not believe in the Constitution, don't believe they have to abide by it, and will compromise to get what they want, and I can't trust it. Simple as that.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a question for Mike. And by the way, you've got 2 minutes. If you answer the question really quickly, and you want to maybe reflect some of the points that they made, use that as an opportunity to do so. You kind of addressed this right towards the end, so you might as well make a question from me. But you mentioned that there are questionable amendments. You mentioned specifically the 16th Amendment. You also said that there's nothing wrong with the Constitution. So if things do need to be fixed, maybe you can elaborate again on, not only how to repeal those amendments, but there are certain things that perhaps the Constitution doesn't address that we see playing out. And if you disagree with me on this, then please point it out. But for instance, the debt. We have some provisions in the Constitution that address, finances and debt, and et cetera, et cetera. And yet we have 17 trillion in debt. And do you think that that's something that we need to address minimum-wise while we're entertaining, even if it's through the traditional process that you're advocating for? And this is kind of a run-on question, but I'm going to let you kind of lead off.
Well, I think the deficit can be addressed by a balanced budget amendment. If we pass an amendment, and that should go through the normal process. If we pass a balanced budget amendment, that will limit what the government can do, because they're going to have to balance the budget. And there are federal statutes out there already limiting what they can do. They just ignore them. You have the debt limit. The debt limit itself is supposed to be a limitation, and it's being ignored. And the Senate is required by law to produce a budget every year. They haven't had one since Obama had an office. So again, I don't see we need to amend the Constitution to deal with those issues. We just need to get people in there who obey the law and obey the Constitution the way it is. And so that's the way I look at it. And again, we need to go at this. Yes, let's propose amendments. Let's see if we can get it to the states and then
just Republicans, and we've got a lot of states in the hands of Democrats. So my question to both of you is going to be, if we do need to do any tinkering around with amendments, maybe repealing the 17th or the 16th, or adding a Constitution amendment, or a whole host of a whole slew of amendments that Mark Levin has mentioned, what's easier? Focusing on getting 100 and 150 members of the House, in addition to what we already have, and maybe 20 members of the Senate, or focusing at the local level for the Convention of States, where you're trying to get, over the entire country, we're looking at potentially thousands of elected officials to get to the point where we need to be. So what's the easier path forward?
Well, I say we try both at the same time and just see which one works first. I am not in favor of all 10 of these amendments, to be clear. I would want very narrow, easily agreed upon ideas like balanced budget and term limits. To me, just focus on the things that are really popular across the country that can have a really big impact really fast. The balance, there are outstanding calls for the balanced budget amendment, by the way. I mean, they got really close. I forget what year it was they tried, but there was a year they tried, and they were only, I don't know, let's say half a dozen states short or something. Now, some of those calls have since been rescinded, so you have to get them back. But that has already started. I think somebody should go out there and identify the states that still have outstanding calls, and then go get the other 10 or 12 or whatever states it is that you need to finish that one. I'll take the rest of my time. I kept on hearing over here, I kept on hearing references to, what are the rules going to be? Will the legislature be allowed to do it? Will the governor be allowed? To me, these are all questions that are not, they're not relevant. It is not a national convention. The national government is not in charge. Congress does not set the rules. There's no way telling Texas, oh, the legislature's allowed to. No, Texas decides for itself. And if Texas wants to hold an election, we'll hold an election to determine the delegates. If Texas is afraid of fraud, then Texas will not hold an election. Every state will do what it's supposed to do. Now, I will agree that the convention will only be as good as the delegates. So I don't think that Texas should go up there. However much we may or may not love some of our congressmen, I don't think we should appoint a darn one of them. Not one. I don't think we should appoint them to our state legislature. I think we should appoint people who are well respected, who are knowledgeable in this area, but who are ordinary citizens. So we may have a point of agreement here that the convention will only be as good as the people appointed. But that is, again, our responsibility to make sure that happens.
Well, the problem I have is
Great for Texas. Great for Texas.
Yeah, I know.
Imagine New Hampshire. Imagine Maine. Imagine.
Congress, Article 5 says that on application of 2/3 of the states, Congress will call the convention.
I need to get them to take their conversation outside.
That is going to be interpreted, I can guarantee you, by Congress as giving them the right to set up the rules. And who's going to stop them?
What are you looking for?
Not the Supreme Court, probably.
Somebody handed those in. Oh, they're not up here.
Because we've got a situation where I don't think the state can really control this as we would like for them to. I'm afraid there's not going to be much control at all. And this is something that is very great. And,
Now I'm going to have some more questions written down, but I have a feeling we're going to get to them, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up for anyone who has questions. So if you want to come line up over here, we'll hand you the microphone, and then we'll hand it back to them so that everyone can hear.
Can we catch them too? I can't catch them too. Ask them questions.
Listening to the arguments here, I think at the very beginning, Mr. Conway made a point that really sums up this whole debate. He said in the beginning that every one of our legislators, president, senators, congressmen, take an oath to defend and protect Connolly didn't say it, but he made it very clear. We first have to figure out how we can protect the laws in that oath of office and prosecute those who have violated That sums it up. All of what you say means nothing if we can't defend the basic oath of office that we have for this country, starting with the president right on down. Executive order number 950, I think, has been already issued. I think every other president before him, going right back to George Washington, sums up to about 45. I think that tells the whole story. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Randy Wayne, and we just open with confidence over here from me. This lady here, and what she told us about the convention of the states, has my confidence. This gentleman here, who's supposed to have a law degree, and was talking about a constitutional convention, and was giving us all kinds of despair. I have no confidence in what he said. Now, yes, just want to open up Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of the full House shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution. Wrapping it up, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. Did I make myself very clear? There's two ways. And there's despair in him. My question is, when we decide a particular issue, should we fall despair and leave it as it is, status quo, or at least attempt to correct a wrong, even if the convention fell and nothing happened? It's a possibility. Or it gets through and it gets amended, but doesn't get passed by 3/4 of the states. Have we not at least put a foot forward to at least one specific issue? At least one. Haven't we got the right to at least put forth a foot one issue? That question is for you.
To be clear, Mr. Connolly, you're not saying that it's not constitutional to have an Article 5 convention. My understanding, and you can address this comments, my question here is that you're pointing out that there's practical problems, in your opinion, with that approach. Not that you can't do it, that there's a whole bunch of practical, logistical issues you're going to face if you try to do it.
That's correct, and I'm not quite sure what the Constitution or what your question was. It sounded more like a diatribe to me that you wanted to know why I was supporting the status quo. I've been sitting here talking tonight about what we need to do to fix things, to get them to follow our Constitution, to appease the President of the United States, if they can violate the oath of office that he took in support of the Constitution. You go after Eric Holder. That's part of the status quo. I think Karen and I and everybody in here agrees that something's got to be done. Our disagreement is on how it's going to be done. I don't favor the Constitutional Convention or the Convention of the States, however you want to word it. Because I don't think it can be controlled. I think we might want to do more damage than good.
broken left and right by all three branches of the federal government, as far as I'm concerned, is on it. The Supreme Court messed up recently, obviously, the bottom here. It is an unconstitutional law. Making up a tax on an area is not making it something constitutional. The president is violating his oath of office all the time, I do believe, by exceeding his authority. I think that Congress is aiding and abetting all of this by not stopping it. So I think my main point is just that we have been trying for decades to try to raise this in through more comfortable means, and it's not working. So, like I said, it took me a while to come around to this, but my feeling is that we should go down fighting. And are there problems with holding a convention when not everybody understands the constitutional proceeding? Sure. But I also think that if we fight, and if we do it, and if we educate people around us, then we can make this happen. But look, if we don't, at least we can fight. At least we try. We've been trying the other way for forever, and it's not doing our thing.
First, I'd like to address the thing about the state conventions. A lot of the conversation here is about what the state convention would look like here in Texas. Well, Texas is one of 49 states. Can you imagine what it would look like in Nevada, California, Oregon, Washington, and every place else? But let me give you an image of what it would be like here in Texas. If we give it to the legislature, how many people were down there and saw HB2? Okay? You think that was fun? You open up to where we're going to be electing delegates to a constitutional convention, that's going to seem like a picnic. Okay? I'm a practical politician. I've been in business for 52 years. I bluntly do not trust the current political environment to generate anybody except a bunch of lunatics to let loose on our Constitution in any form, whether it is a convention, a constitutional convention, or a convention of the states. That would just make 50 groups of lunatics. Okay? I just want to return to what it was based on. I want us to go back and say how much of what the EPA is doing is actually constitutional. Okay? The fact we have a constitutionality, it has to deal with what we currently have. And the effort to expand that, to change the Constitution, is looking for a lot more trouble. It's going to distract us from the job we need to do. Thank you very much.
Well, hello, my name is Ryan Spurlock. A little bit about myself. I started in the Navy after 6 years of serving in the United States Navy, obviously. First question is, what amendments do you want changed? What do you want to see come about the Constitution? People say we need to have this proposal, but what are we proposing? That hasn't been discussed. And this is my first meeting, so maybe I can think about it for that. I apologize. What's going to be proposed? What do you want to propose? And the second question is, it seems all this is really stemming from the fact that currently all are being ruled by an oligarchy. And to look at it differently, I think is kind of foolish. So, is this even the way we want to try and handle that? From changing from an oligarchy to an actual government of full and violence. The thing that only thing I know in recent history that has even made the government flinch would be the 9/12 march. And that was shut down. Very little people heard about it, very little people found out about it. But over 1 million supporters when 9/12 march showed up, and the federal government shut down the whole day. Everyone left. So if we want to try and enforce that our congressmen, senators, presidents, vice presidents, we want to enforce them to actually honor and uphold their oath, we need to show that we mean to enforce them.
So, to get back to one of the questions, and then you comment on the rest of it, what, if you could just snap your finger, what amendments would you put through, if any at all?
My focus is much more on getting our head against the wall battle we've been fighting against the federal government, when almost every single last one of them is in on it, do you want to keep fighting that battle? And not every once in a while we get in somebody who goes up and does something. But, we get them in a couple at a time. It really to make a difference. We can't just have one Ted Cruz up there. We need to have a lot of them. A lot of them. And you're facing laws that protect incumbents, that make it really difficult to take them down in primaries. That make it really just makes it difficult. Okay? What Ted did was really unbelievable. So you can't expect her to do that over and over and over again. So come back around. Yeah, sure, it's going to be hard to go to the state legislature and convince them to appoint some decent men and women to run in Texas. And if it's hard here, it's going to be worse around probably than all. But A, you got to try. B, I think that is a better fight to fight than the same one we've been fighting over and over again for 23 years.
Well, there was a commission of states, and amendments were being proposed. I would agree with Tara. He will be balanced budget, because I think that would strike at the heart of the left, and they would spend tax and spend philosophy. I think at the same time, if I were going to propose other amendments, I would put an amendment in that would codify what's in the preamble of the Bill of Rights, and that is, these can't be touched. These are rights that are granted to us by God, not by our government. Therefore, the government can't take it away. So that's the two I would be interested in.
My name is John Shu. Right down the stuff came down here. Has some kindness. But my question is this. We have a weapon, the Congress has a weapon to control the executive branch and the judiciary, which is impeachment. It would be the most practical weapon it would seem on the face of it. How do we make the House use it? What pressure point can you put on the House to encourage them to use it? Right now, it's a weapon that is very risky, which is seldom used even against corrupt judges. How can we make them use it? It would seem to be that a political party that is afraid to impeach the executive is suspect. How do we make them do it?
Let me expand on that just a little bit. So, obviously, one of the key hurdles to impeachment right now is the Senate. They're just not efficient. So, why spending bills? But I think to a larger point is accountability at the local, state, and federal level, an avenue to fixing our problem as opposed to the union process. Is that ultimately, or maybe we should be focusing more of our efforts on electing our people, or should we be focusing our efforts on an amendment process, or do those both go hand in hand?
Look, I'm not saying let's go get a convention and then just ignore the rest of it. I'm not saying that. Obviously, we need to try. I do not think impeachment is productive at this moment in time because this is a whole north. It means we can be able to turn on us. And thought it was a really good sales thing for us to have. And so, at a minimum, I'm suggesting it's foolhardy for us to take it off the table without even thinking about it, without even considering whether there's a way to make this happen and to get good delegates to go and represent us. I happen to think we keep the scope narrow to something that has appeal across the country, like the balanced budget amendment or like term limits, which have wide aims. Lots of people, independents, Democrats, Republicans, like it. So I feel like if we keep our focus narrow on things that we can gather a lot of support, there is a lot of reason to think that we could succeed, and I really believe that.
So touching on the impeachment issue, that is something that everybody says we can't do it, the Senate won't vote for it. The House can impeach the president, with a simple majority, the Senate has to be convicted by two-thirds. Well, that's not going to happen. But a lot of people want us to give it a try. About a year ago, on my blog, I wrote an article called Peaceful Offensive. And I outlined what Obama was doing. That thing went viral. One website, redflag.com, has told me they had 25 million views of that. So what I did in response to that is I've gone on for articles now. And I posted them on my blog, and we are refining them because I did this about 2 months ago, and within 48 hours there was new rounds for impeachment. Obama was a great friend of mine. But here's the reason I want this to happen. And once I do these and find them, there are people arranging meetings face to face with members of Congress. Because we're going to approach it like this. You have a duty to do this, but it's going to be in your best interest. Because here's the deal. Right now, we can't seem to stop it all. They can't seem to. But if the House passes articles of impeachment, they appoint special prosecutors to prosecute the case in front of the jury, which is the U.S. Senate, with Judge Roberts, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presiding. A lot of your executive privilege goes out the window. This becomes a criminal matter. These prosecutors will have extraordinary power to get the documents that they couldn't get, the House couldn't get in Fast and Furious. Extraordinary power to get documents about the IRS scandal. To get documents about Benghazi primarily. I think at that point, the national news media will stop ignoring this. The president's under fire anyway with a lot of his own people. A lot of them are not going to be able to ignore it. Because there's going to be stuff coming out like you would not believe. And that's the way we're approaching the House right now.
I'm Jimmy Becker. I'm a transplant in Texas, born and raised in California, and I have to qualify that. It's only where I'm from, it's not my condition. I have to agree with the gentleman at the front of the room. I think we have to keep our Constitution in place. I too, 50 years ago tomorrow, standing on a firing range, qualifying with a rifle when I put mine for a green one. And I had to raise my right hand. And I took the same oath that you did, but probably the same oath that many of you in this room took. And everyone back in Washington took. They don't take it seriously. All they're looking for is for their next election to keep their seat. These career politicians that are there for 25, 30 years. This is obscene. It's ridiculous. And we need to show what we can do with our feet and getting us and like-minded people like us to the ballot box. We can start right here locally and get rid of Pete Sessions. He's holding up the and he needs to go. He's one of the good old boys that's been here 20 years. He needs to go. And I believe there's a march this weekend for that very cause. when you talk about a convention, you're talking about a committee. The committee designed the camel. You see how it turned out? I agree with you, sir. I think that we should keep the Constitution. I don't have a question, just a comment. Thank you.
Oh, too much better. A committee created the Constitution. It was a committee of 55 men. They were all men, 55 men who came from 12 colonies in Rhode Island and trusted in the code. 55 men composed a committee. And they had a discussion much like we're having tonight, which I want to say, by the way, I think it's great. We're having honest disagreements about principles. None of this is personal. I think it's wonderful that we can all come in here and have a discussion about our form of government, about what is and isn't a good idea, and what will or will not further our freedom, because that's what this is about. So, anyway, I thought it all in.
I just want to thank the gentleman for his service and remind President Obama that 21 meetings yesterday this ordinance. We all have that oath of office. And by the way, when I became executive director of the U.S. Justice Foundation a year ago, the foundation has existed for 35 years in California. A good friend of mine, he got elected judge in San Diego County, which is the rim of the left system out there. He was right over Republicans. They called me and they said, "You take over the executive director." I said, "On condition. I will not move the people of the public of California."
I brought things on the statement in like one statement. We blame the government that we have. It's the people who don't know what's in this little tiny book. It is our responsibility. We're the ones that are here. And I have two elements in the room that I'd like for both of y'all to address. Number one, Mr. Conley said that he would support amendments that would keep it from being my recommendation, or it would enforce this little book right here. Well, how would you address another amendment to enforce the first 10, which have never been ratified, and only take up 3 pages in this little book? And, Tiara, my question for you, that open to repeal the 16th Amendment, to balance budget. Balancing the budget would not address it because all the good do is print more money, so how would that work? So we'll take this over.
Well, as I understood your question, Barbara, I don't support the constitutional convention of the states. I said this was hypothetical. If there was such, that's the type of amendment that we proposed. And what I mentioned about the Bill of Rights was codifying exactly those 10 bills, 10 amendments, and saying, yes, these cannot be amended by the Constitution by any means, by the Congress or by the Convention or anything else. These are rights that are inherently belong to the American people. They cannot be taken away. Period. And so,
I guess all I would say is explain languages about budget, and that's what the doing is trying to figure out how to do that so that it's serving our purposes, which is federal government can put more money for itself and get itself out of the hole, and maybe it's balanced against the taxes brought in, or there's just
stop spending. Stop spending.
Because, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be as good as the language in the amendment. So that kind of goes back to, I agree, but we have not been following portions of the Constitution since the FDR's repeal. FDR's repeal. This is what people turned on us then. And since then, there have been whole portions of the Constitution that have not been what they were supposed to be. So I agree, the Constitution should be enough. It's just that the federal government is not staying within the scope of what we have given them. And what Alexander Hamilton said is when that happens, when the federal government refuses to
I guess my question is, what is the best use of our time? And my concern is, considering the consolidation of very powerful forces that now on both sides, the Republican Party is clearly as owned as the Democratic Party. We see who their contributors are all the exact same guys. The top 5 contributors to both parties are the exact same cats, led by Goldman Sachs and Goldman. Who my friends in Wall Street tell me they believe are the most corrupt. That's the most corrupt company that's ever been created. They the thing to say about that is pretty absurd. So, considering that that's the case, and we have limited resources, we have our efforts, we have our time that we can put in, and certainly put our will forward as a people. What's our best path forward? And the way when I'm thinking about that, what I'm thinking about is that the states have had some decent luck with nullification, and basically there have been nullifying things to the courts. In the state of Texas, we've had some good chances of nullifying things like EPA regulations, like the whole Ocean Action, like fires and things. We've had good luck here. The state of Oklahoma, New Mexico, and a couple of cases, mostly like cases like Arizona and North Carolina. There's also challenges there in certain cases. Several challenges in Obamacare. Is our time better served focusing on the state of Texas, cleaning up our act, and standing up against the federal government from a nullification perspective, and basically just standing our ground, putting a Bridgewater in and saying we won't allow you to cross this line? Is that a better use of our time, or do you really feel that we have a reasonable chance to put our time towards convention or other types of changes at the federal level that actually have a statistically good chance of succeeding versus us spending our time in Texas?
That's a really fair question. I think it would probably be a bad use of resources to go out and try to get a convention for all of these things, or even for any great number of them. Mostly because I think people are not educated enough about the Constitution and about how the government has gone so badly awry. I do think it could be a good use of resources. As I mentioned about the budget amendment, there are a lot about taking halls for that convention. So to go find the other 10, or I don't know the exact number, I'm sorry. I know they were close, and a total reveal, and there shouldn't be that much more to go to get there. So to me, that seems like a reasonable use of resources. I think other than that, I think we should go after the bad incumbents, not some incumbents in the primaries. I think, like I said before, I think that's really difficult, so maybe we need to just pick the ones that are going to make a big statement and we take them down or something like that.
Are those referring to federal appointments or within our state legislature?
Within the federal legislature, I think within the state legislature, we should do the same thing. I think the fact that we don't have better leadership in our state house in a state like Texas is a disgrace. And I think, the primaries are coming up in March, I think, in March right there. The primaries are coming up, and we need to do everything we can to stay there. I think for now, we should focus on that. I don't think we should focus on trying to get a convention. We should be just distracting ourselves from stuff that we can do in March. But anyway, I don't know if I answered your question. I think we should focus on the House budget amendment to the degree we can. It seems achievable. I think we should focus on primaries, and I think we should focus on education. Just educating people around us about what the Constitution says the federal government can't do that it needs to do anyway.
I think we have to take an approach of attacking across the board. And this is the way what they've been doing to us for years. Back in the 1960s when I was the Young Americans for Freedom, and that we saw what was happening then. That they were attacking us on the college campuses, into education, they were attacking our military, they were attacking us across the board in the courts. You had all this money, the ACLU still gets $1 million a year from the Progressive Insurance. The president of the United States Justice Foundation, we were relying on contributions that average $15 per person to keep going. But we're keeping up the fight, and just the other day, we scored a victory. It wasn't our victory by ourselves, but we were involved in the biggest breach. We got the Court of Appeals to rule that the HHS mandate on businesses owned by religious families that says that they have to provide free contraception and abortion services. That is unconstitutional. We now have a court of appeals that says that. And we're continuing with that type of fight. So that's an area we have to continue to fight in. But you are right, we have had some success. We need to go after those people in the federal government. We need to let them know we want to hold them accountable. That's why I think the article that we should know. I wish I was a district attorney. I don't want to run for the public office, but if I was a district attorney, first thing I'd do would be file criminal charges against Obama and Eric Holder for violating the federal law, which I think is what the district attorney can do. But the final battle, the final line of defense is going to be two areas. Number one, the state's nullification. Number two, the sheriffs. The elected sheriffs. Those are the people that we need to make sure we get behind and support.
Looks like we have time for two questions if we're concise in our questions, so two more.
My name is Mike, and I'm a writer from Oklahoma. Just a quick comment. You made the statement that the American people are incredibly ignorant of our Constitution. And I think that's the problem. We don't need a convention of the states to start amending that Constitution. We need the American people to enforce it. George Washington said basically it's nothing but a piece of paper. You don't enforce it. And calling these convention, adding to it, let's just make another law. Let's just throw some more stuff out there. Okay? Another comment that was made, Lady Barbara made the comment that, yeah, balanced budget amendment, sure, they would just print more money. And I saw the look on your face, I was like, well, that's what we need. They're printing $8 billion a month right now, somebody in the economy. We've lost 96% of our dollar. It is what it is. Unless you address the Federal Reserve, you can amend your Constitution all day. It's not going to be good. At least, I don't know, I haven't figured out all the numbers, but at least 75 to 80% of what Congress does now is unconstitutional already. That Constitution gives the federal government about 18 to 20 things, arguably, that they can do. That's it. So when you start to say, well, how much of what the EPA does is constitutional? None of it. None of it. The IRS, what do they do? You go on and on and on and on and on. Okay? What we need to do is enforce the Constitution that we have, educate the American people, educate the voters, so that when they pull those levers, they're looking for constitutionalists. If there isn't one, then we throw the guy out and we find somebody to run that will. Enforce it. That's what we need to do. You're not going to fix this with a convention of the states. And I do beg to differ with you as to how the original convention went. Those men were bound by their states to revise the Articles of Confederation, and they threw it out, and they gave us a whole new document. Well, we got lucky that time. We had Madison, Jefferson, folks like that running around, Rutherford, guys like that. Now we got baloney. Yeah, that's what I meant. We got Pelosi, Baker, and Reed running around there, with maybe Al Gore on the side trying to fix global warming. Give me a break. We're going to change the country. What do you want to do? You're not going to balance your budget, but just going to raise your taxes through the roof and print money. Answer. Fire. The 10th Amendment.
The things that were given us in the Constitution were three branches of government that were supposed to keep checks and balances on each other. The states were given power. By the way, we took away one of those powers when we ratified the 17th Amendment. That was removed in 1982. However, we took power away from the states. One of the few things remaining for us that is a check and balance is this power to go to our government and say, no,
last question, and I'll have a real quick comment before we head out, and hand it over to
Jerry Sumner, I'm from Rowlett. This is my first kind of meeting. It's good to see people out who are actually interested. I wanted to ask how many of you know what Sarbanes-Oxley is? That's good. We have Sarbanes-Oxley that supposedly protects us from fraud in the financial arena committed by corporations by placing the chief executive officer of companies online, on the hook, with criminal penalties for lying about their numbers that they turn in. We don't have stops, as it's not called, for government. We don't have it. When somebody stands up and says, I'm going to save $2,500 per family on their health care insurance, nobody holds his feet to the fire. There's no criminal penalties involved in committing fraud on Social Security funds, borrowing from Howard Trust Fund, or anything else that has to do with finances in the federal government or even in the state government. How many of you would like to see Sarbanes-Oxley or something similar apply to government, requiring the chief executive to go to jail if he lies about his employees?
Okay, I'm going to close with a few comments here. We all know that there's problems. Our founders knew that the Constitution was not going to be perfect. They've clearly put in an avenue here to make changes. So I think that it may be misguided to suggest that it's fine the way it is. I think that, my personal opinion now, no longer the moderator, that we may in the future need to, we may not. Someone mentioned the 10th Amendment. I believe, just like all of you in here, the 10th Amendment means what it says. But let me give you a quick example of this. In the drafting of the Constitution, they took out expressly, it says, expressly delegated to. So now there's been hundreds of years of Supreme Court precedents, litigation on this issue, which basically says that creates implied power, but it doesn't necessarily mean what it says. I think that's a problem. I don't think that's the original intent. But this is the problem we're up against, is the left has nuanced arguments and Supreme Court precedents that we're up against that really manipulate the very meaning of what it is. So it may, at some point in time, come to the point where we need to do things. And how do we get to that point? Well, I think that all of the arguments we've seen up here, it boils down to the first step being accountability. You have to start at the local level, the state level, the federal level. You have to follow it, you have to know how they're voting. That's certainly where I come in at the federal level, and the federal organizations will work, and there's a lot of people in here that know a heck of a lot of state and local, as well as federal. So we need to start doing something. And I'm going to sit the fence here, maybe I should run for office someday, but I'm in favor of all these options. I think that the states have to push back. I'm open for a constitutional convention or a convention of states. I'm open to amendment process, but it all starts out with the only way we get this thing done is we have the right people in the right places at the right time. Now, all of these two close out with like a 30-second statement if you need it, and that'll be it. We'll hand it over to whoever's going to work for it.
And you remind us that we're all on the same team. And we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. I think Bob Wayne was the one that said, look, we agree on 80%, you're pretty darn good. Take that. We're all on the same team. We're just arguing about how to get back to where we all know we should be.
One key word that's come up tonight, we haven't discussed education. People out there don't know about the Constitution. The 1,500 college graduates were surveyed about the First Amendment and what was expected in the First Amendment. Not only did most of them not name all 5 rights, some of them couldn't even name one, and 25% of them thought the First Amendment protected their right to a pen. But I'm serious, this was liberating mistake. That's what's scary. We have to educate our children, we have to take back our schools, and let them learn about the Constitution.
Very good job. Big round of applause for our moderator. swear to God, I believe that we're going to be out today.